So if you could give us an introduction of yourself and general information about you and your firm.
Hi, good morning, Damon. Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here. My name is John Hilton. I'm a life and legacy planner. A lot of people don't know what that means, but essentially, an estate planner that deals not just with death, but with planning for our clients' entire life, from the age of 18 all the way through and beyond death to capture their life and legacy for multiple generations. And this from a personal standpoint, um, I was a flight paramedic for 20 years. And after that, I went into hospital administration. And through a turn of events, I decided to go to law school. And I discovered that this was a tool that I could use to really make an impact on people's lives. And so I have been doing this type of work for almost 6 years now. It's just such a passion of mine to be able to get into people's lives, hear their stories, and be able to help guide them in creating this life plan and this legacy for them.
Excellent, excellent. And so, what are the things that you offer as far as helping people protect their legacy in their life? What are the mechanisms or the tools that are used for that?
So it actually starts at age 18. As soon as somebody turns 18, they are an adult. And so kids going off to college, for example, they need documentation to be able to allow their parents or other people in their lives to be able to make medical decisions for them. They need to have documentation to allow someone to make financial decisions for them in the event that they should become incapacitated, have a bad accident, or not be able to manage their affairs for some reason. And we see this, unfortunately, it's way too common, but we see these college students heading home for spring break or heading back to school. They have an accident. They're 18, 19 years old, and they don't have anybody named to step in and manage these things for them. So it starts there. And then all the way through marriage and having children. A lot of people don't think about what would happen to their children as parents if they were not able to return home that night. Mom and dad are out on a date, young child is at home with a babysitter, they're involved in an accident, they don't come home. What happens to that child? And that child, if there's not somebody named with proper legal authority to take custody of that child could end up in the hands and home and care of a stranger, because the Department of Child Safety, or some people call it, Child Protective Services, they have a duty to ensure that that child is in a safe environment. And that babysitter doesn't have the legal authority to hang on to that child for a day or two or a week or however long it may take until mom and dad are back in their lives. Um, and even, the worst case scenario, mom and dad are killed or permanently incapacitated in an accident. Who will be that child's permanent guardian for the rest of their lives? And those are important decisions that parents have to make. You don't want just anybody stepping up and saying, I'm going to raise that child, because, all of us as parents, we have our values and the things, the way that we want our child raised. We have spiritual values and social values, financial values, education, all those things that are so important. And so planning for that unlikely but possible eventuality that something could happen, knowing that you've got the right people named who can step in and have the legal right and nomination by you to petition the court to have guardianship over your child and raise your child in the way that you would want them raised. So that's just the beginning. As we go through the life cycle, as our children are going off to college, making sure that they have those documents I was talking about before to protect their health care and their finances as they become young adults. And then as we move into our older years, ensuring that we have a plan to pass our assets on to our children and do that in a way that is protected for them, so that in the event that our child also runs into difficulties as an adult, whether it's credit issues or divorce or things like that, that the assets that you're passing on to them are protected and they're not caught up into those events. As we age, we face the possibility of becoming incapacitated and needing in-home or skilled nursing care in a facility, and ensuring that there's a plan in place that allows us to pay for that in such a way that doesn't drain our life savings, and in a way that we would want to be cared for. So when I talk about life and legacy, it starts from early in life all the way through to ultimately to when we die and we pass those assets on to our children. And when I talk about legacy, a lot of people think about legacy purely in financial, but I believe every person, and more specifically, maybe every family, has a story to tell, and that story is more important than just for our lifetime. It carries on to future generations, and part of what I like doing with families is capturing their story and letting that become a part of their legacy for their children and grandchildren and for future generations.
Excellent. And so with all of that, what is the tool or the mechanism that you most often use to help people with their life and legacy planning and avoid a lot of the mishaps that you were just referring to?
Sure. Um, there are a lot of tools that we use. The one tool that I believe most effectively allows families to capture their legacy and to pass their assets on to children, and protect them, is through the use of a revocable living trust. That's not to say that everyone has to have a revocable living trust, and that if it's not the right call for you, there are other mechanisms, but the most effective way to do that is through a trust.
Okay. And is there only one type of trust, or are there multiple types of trust?
Yeah, actually, there are numerous types of trust. The most common that we use is the revocable living trust, and that's a type of trust that during your life, you have total control over all of your assets. You can put assets into the trust, you can remove them, sell them, give them away. You're in total control of your assets throughout your life. But there are times when there are what we call irrevocable trust that we use for other types of planning. When we have really like ultra high net worth clients, sometimes we can take a portion of their financial assets and put them in an irrevocable trust. There are a lot of benefits to that for some people. It's pretty rare. We know that those ultra high net worth clients, make up a very small percentage of our population, but there's that type that has some tax benefits, allowing assets to pass like to grandchildren and future generations with some tax benefits. However, that type of trust people are often a little concerned about because you actually have to give up control of that asset during your life. So ultra high net worth, if you got an extra $10 million lying around that you want to protect, for future generations, that might be a good call for you. But I would say, for well over 99% of our clients, a revocable trust in which they maintain control of their assets throughout their life is the preferred. Now, another type of trust that we often deal with, just as a side note, I have a son with autism. He's 33 years old, and he's dependent on public benefits. So another type of trust that we'll use is what we call a supplemental needs trust. And that allows assets to pour into that trust for my son's use, for example, without compromising his eligibility for those benefits. And so anyone who has a child with any kind of disability or other type of special needs, that's something that we recommend to them to ensure that they can still inherit, still maintain their quality of life, have access to the comforts of life, and still have access to those public benefits.
Okay, excellent. And so you mentioned that there is you can use trust to protect your assets or to help yourself in as far as your legacy planning goes.
Mhm.
But you also mentioned that there are other mechanisms. What are those other mechanisms that can be used other than a trust?
Well, sure. We have, clients who come through our office that, maybe they just don't have enough assets to really justify the investment into a trust plan. And so we will work with them to ensure that those assets pass to their children or other beneficiaries, through beneficiary designations, beneficiary deeds, a will. Um, and even with that, that doesn't mean that that family doesn't have a story to tell. So capturing that legacy for them, and it doesn't matter if you're living on $10,000 a year in Social Security or $10 million a year in investments. You have a story that is so unique to you and your family, and that's your legacy. And I'll tell us a very quick story to illustrate this. My dad was a pastor of a church. I grew up sitting on the front pew with my mother every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night, listening to my dad teach the Bible. My dad was a teacher and a true pastor. He really cared about his flock. He wasn't a fire and brimstone preacher. He really just was like to just take care of his people. And his special gift was going into these churches where there were three parishioners on Social Security, and the church was about to go broke, and they were going to close it down. And he would go in and build it up and bring in young people and families and shepherd them. And so I grew up, watching that and learning from my dad how to be a teacher and how to care for people and the value of giving. And later on, my dad left the pastorship and became a missionary, and so we ended up down in Mexico, doing a lot, creating a lot of missions and things like that. And when my dad died about 20 years ago, when I went to his funeral, there were people in that chapel that I had never met. I mean, it's just all these people. Like, who are all these people? And I asked them, like, how did you know my dad? And I was getting all these stories from people about, well, I was in really bad shape. I didn't have a job. I was losing my house. Your dad gave me work, and he allowed me to maintain my dignity and earn some money and get back on my feet. Or your dad would he would feed me. He'd bring me a meal every day because he knew that I was struggling. And so that was my dad.
Right.
So when my dad died, they didn't have anything. My dad gave everything away, and
Mm.
they were renting a house. My mom and dad were, and uh, he was laying there in the hospital bed, and I was talking to him, and he said, "John, I have one regret in life." I said, "What's that, Dad?" And he said, "My only regret is that I didn't leave my children $5,000." And that to him was just such a huge amount of money.
Mm.
And I say, "Dad, you don't have to have any regrets, because what you left me was your legacy. You left me with that spirit of helping people and reaching out to people and being able to teach people what's important to them. You left me a legacy of being self-sufficient and of learning how to do so many things in life, because my dad was kind of a handyman, and he was always having to do odd jobs to help support the church. And
Mm.
I would go with him. So the time I was 4 years old, I was out there with him, handing him tools and learning how to build and do home maintenance and projects like that. And I said, "You've left me so much more than any amount of money
Mm.
could ever equal."
Right.
That's the legacy. So when I talk to people, for me, capturing their legacy isn't about ensuring that all of their financial, assets are there to support their children from multiple generations. It's about capturing those stories and making sure that their family recognizes that legacy, and encouraging people, that it doesn't matter if you've never thought about your legacy. You're going to leave a legacy one way or the other.
Mm.
It can either be intentional or it can be accidental,
Right.
and
Right.
it's never too late. to make it intentional and to live your life with purpose, to have that legacy that you leave behind. And so for me, the documents that I prepare, whether it's a will or a trust or beneficiary designations, those are simply building blocks, that are, whatever's appropriate for that particular family. But upon those building blocks, upon that foundation, is what we're able then to build, because whether there's peace of mind, the family knows how things are going to happen, the children know, the parents know, they know that if mom and dad end up in a skilled nursing facility, that there's a mechanism in place to pay for that without having to, impoverish the family. So for me, that those are the mechanisms that I use, is finding what's right for the family in order to give them that peace of mind and allow them to focus on family unity and building legacy and avoiding the conflict that comes from so many estate plans that people do.
Okay, that's a beautiful story, by the way. Thank you for telling it.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, it is. It's so close to my heart, and it's I tell it to everybody I can, when we're talking, because I think it's really indicative of you don't have to have money to have a legacy.
right.
You just capture your story and live life with purpose.
Good. And so with capturing the story, and there's a lot of people who may watch this video who don't really understand the differences between, let's say, a will or a trust or a living, what is it called? A living, what is it? Power of attorney, a
Yeah.
medical power of attorney, all those sorts of different things, mechanisms you're talking about that you mentioned a moment ago. Can you just do a brief rundown on what is the difference between all of those things, and why it's important for somebody to have all of those things?
Sure. Let me preface that answer with a quick discussion on probate.
Okay.
Um, so, and it'll make sense as
Yes.
we move forward. But
Yes.
um, just to kind of give you, some foundation, um, typical lawyer work creates conflict,
Mm,
whether it's negotiating a contract, or creating a will. The way the legal system is has evolved over centuries is that inherent in what we do is the potential for conflict. And so when you create a will, even, you're creating potential for conflict, because when that person dies, and that will has to go to court to be probated, there is the potential there always for conflict to arise in the family.
mm,
And I talk to parents all the time, like, well, that's never going to happen to us. Our children, they all get along, they love each other, they all want what's best for each other. And I was like, what, I believe you, and I believe that that's true today.
right.
But our probate courts are full and overflowing with families who are fighting over stuff after mom and dad are gone. And so probate is really just the action of taking that will and putting it under the jurisdiction of the courts, and having the courts oversee the distribution of the assets, of the person who has died, to the people named in the will. But it's actually an errant conflict. The first people that have to be paid are your creditors, and so creditors come in and they want to take their piece of it. And you have, family members who think the will isn't fair, and you've got, it's just, the conflict that arises out of probate is destroys families, actually. And I have clients come to my office, and many of them come see me and they say, John, I want to create a trust because I just probated my mom's estate, and it was the most horrible thing I've ever done. I don't want my kids to go through it. So probate is this process of putting this estate under the jurisdiction of the court, and creating these wills, like most estate planners do. Um, is just like promulgating that conflict.
Mm.
So when we work with people, my goal is with every client is to create a safety net for their family with documents and plans that don't allow anything to fall through that safety net. So it might be that a will that is going to have to go through probate is what that family feels is appropriate for them. But along with that, then some of the other tools we use, like I said before, are beneficiary designations, where anything that has a beneficiary does not go through that court process. So that involves a beneficiary deed on your home, beneficiary designations on bank accounts, beneficiary designations on retirement accounts and life insurance policies. And so we'll work with families to make sure that all of those things have the proper beneficiaries named, and then we can get around that court process.